All right, plan stage meeting. What date is it? 2021 08 18. We even read the dates in ISO standards. So yeah. So like the first item, yeah, as part of a emerging engineering allocation plan, I've been asked to take part in a 3-month headcount reset that would see 2 backend engineers from each group move to manage access temporarily. Teams across the sub-department are taking part. Our contribution will be to work on the workspaces project, which is formerly known as consolidation of groups and projects. So from project management, I believe it's Alexandra and Brett will take part. From product planning, Charlie, and I'm hoping Jan, but he's currently on PTO, but I'll have a discussion with him on Monday. The purpose is to allow the access team to focus on what is like a currently unsustainable number of incidents and a growing security backlog. Um, and yeah, so if there are any like questions, concerns, discussion items, like yeah, please hit us with them. I'm realizing this is in the wrong part of the agenda, but so sorry if it's a surprise.
John, did you mention, is it permanent or is it 3 months or what is it? Sorry, I need coffee.
Yeah, it's 3 months. I mean, I can kick off. Like, my main concern is that we've already started work items on the product planning side, and that if we stop now, we end up with a significant piece of technical debt. I think we spoke about this in yesterday's meeting, but it would be the number one concern that I have would be that we simply do a hard stop now and we retain this piece of technical debt indefinitely, which I think is kind of against the whole point of this engineering allocation, which is to reduce technical debt. So yeah, I'm not clear yet on, like, this literally happened in the last 24 48 hours, like, so I'm not clear yet on whether we're going to roll work items into workspaces and consider that the same thing, and then we're essentially allocating 4 members of the team to something we would have worked on anyway, or whether work items is going, we're going to have to come up with some mitigation for that in the meantime.
We can have that discussion, but as much as we can decouple from workspace, just like we did when we figured out how to do the MVC for work items, I don't think we should rely on that necessarily for it to go live, but we could chat with Melissa, who will be heading that up.
I think we can try to mitigate this risk as much as possible. After our EMPM sync yesterday, sort of the action item that I had, and I started drafting it yesterday, was an issue just like outline the 3 options and figure out the best way to move forward. And we just have some additional constraints we need to take into consideration. I definitely think since this is just back end, there's a lot of progress we can make on the front end in the interim. So I think we'll just have to maybe sequence things a little bit differently, but I don't think we need to do a full stop on anything. With that said, we also have to take into consideration the infra-dev stuff that we still have to prioritize first above building anything new. So that's what I'm going to do after this call and work on this morning, is that sort of issue for us to discuss async. And then if we want to hop on a Zoom together and kind of make some decisions about the best way to proceed, we can do that together as a team.
I'd like to keep things going as well. I do feel, though, if this is a 3-month commitment for our team, that we're probably going to see a 3-month impact or more on category level maturities and things like that. So we need to just communicate that up and make sure that we just move our timelines and everybody's on the same page.
Gabe and Kristen, like, what do you see the people who remain during this headcount reset? What do you see us working on? Like, are we talking primarily infra dev reliability issues, or will we have some capacity put aside to work on work items?
The way it's sounding now, there'll be very little to work on work items. So we need to keep it alive in a way, and potentially look at some front end work we could do around how we're going to be doing tracking during this time. We could also look at saved views and some of the ideas that we have that are more front end intensive, and potentially do small MVCs on those and take a lot of the focus off the back end over onto the front end, if that's possible.
Yeah, I also, well, I think we can allocate a little bit of capacity that we need to do based on how we want to sequence things out. I know Heinrich is going to be working on Postgres full text search for the issue list and filtering so that we don't keep returning 500 errors, especially as issues get larger. That's going to be like beneficial in the long run either way. But I also see an opportunity for us to sort of more or less build out most of the front end, even if we have to like stub out some of the data or mock some of the queries or things like that. So it'll give us a lot of chance, like if we can focus on that and iterating on the UX and the UI and the new Vue app, even if we don't have all the backend support and everything like finished, we can at least start doing better validation with end users and getting feedback and kind of looping through that stuff. So then as soon as we do have more backend capacity, like we should have a pretty clear picture on what exactly needs to be done and we can knock those things out. But again, I was going to propose that in the issue that I write up, but I think that there are some opportunities that we can still move work items forward, and we should.
Yeah, one other thing to know is, and I learned this yesterday, so I'm still figuring out exactly what the mechanics are, but there's a way to basically request for your error budgets to be changed. So I'm reading up on that. There's another group that's going through that, which basically that may just give us some breathing room from that perspective, right? Of not having such a high budget and hopefully being able, or rather having a higher budget and being able to work on work items a little bit more. So it's one thing. The other is that there's the MR in progress to transition projects out of plan. So I am curious if that were to go through, what would that mean as far as our SLAs and budgets go? Like where would we fall? So that's something to, I don't know how we do that math, but I would be interested to see that. And I'll ping on that. I know Tim's out this week, but he's in next week. And coincidentally, I'm at one-on-one with him. So I'll ask him to take a look at that MR and hopefully approve it. And then at least that's one thing kind of like off this team's plate as far as SaaS reliability.
Yeah, that is what my next point was, which is that like we still have a fair bit of project stuff, especially within like the performance concerns, and it's still the biggest contributor to error budget. So I was previously like of the mindset that we would sort of finish out what we're working on before, kicking any of that stuff over the fence, because I don't want to like dump more hard work on the managed team, which is already overloaded, right? As part of this whole thing. But now, we're losing 2 engineers temporarily per team. So I'm more okay with like kicking this stuff over and getting it off of our plate. So yeah, I think you answered my question, which was going to be like, what do we need to do to kind of get that ball rolling? And then we should maybe have a discussion as well on just like, should we, drop things that we have in progress? I don't think so, but and Mario, I can catch up with you separately on kind of the project stuff that you've been working on to to see if there's a good breaking point where we could like pause and hand off and not have to keep dedicating capacity to that.
And I also like just overall wonder how much of this stuff is, if we're consolidating groups and projects, right? I think this will be a conversation within the workspaces team of like, how much of this stuff do we need to fix, right? If it's gonna theoretically go away sooner than we expected now because we're accelerating. So we'll see.
So just so I'm clear, who is going to own projects? Is that managed access?
Workspaces.
Okay.
I was just going to add, I think right now projects are the biggest vendor from what I've learned thus far about error budgets and SLAs. I checked yesterday, and over the last 28 rolling days, we're only 3 hours over budget, which is a lot better than it was a few weeks ago where we were like 20 hours over budget. So it looks, I don't know what all do we change, but at least maybe we're not getting hit as hard or something on GitLab.com, but they're not as bad as they were. And so if we shed projects, I have a feeling, they'll get a lot better. And then we can like focus on the things specific to plan, like issue search and stuff like that, that is really problematic.
I think I'm next. So my question was on the front end side of things, I think it's fine to keep moving forward on work items. I mean, that was the plan originally when we were saying that on the back end, or we were saying reliability, we're going to spend about 50% of our time on there. That was primarily going to be a back end thing. So I think we were always going to be a little ahead on the front end of work items. My question is, are we still dedicating 50% of the new? So are we saying 50% of 50% is what has to work on the reliability stuff, or is it 50% of what our capacity was with all of our engineers? So essentially all 100% has to be on, or should be on, reliability.
I think we were originally targeting 50%. But I think, you know, like we can look at percentage, or we can look at what are the most important things that we need to do, right, to actually move the number. I care more about actually improving error budgets than I do how many engineers we have working on it. And if we can basically improve our error budget by 50% or something like that with just a couple wins, then that's great, right? We don't need to knock it all out, because I do know we need to support the sharding effort. So there's that one issue for removing the access taggable gem from projects. And then we have a couple high risk areas that are affecting customers, like the issue search. And I think it's also important to get the bonsai stuff in, at least the observability, so that we know if we make changes, if it makes things better. But I think that's something we can kind of talk about as a team. Like, I think if we're tackling the most important things that are going to move the needle the most, I don't think that management or leadership is going to care about what percentage we allocate. If that makes sense.
I think that's true in theory, Gabe, but I do know, like, at least I've heard, right, and that's what Donald's bringing up, or somebody here, that there are engineering leaderships like asking how many people are working on what, right, and that's how they're measuring. So to that end, I'll check with David to see if this still applies, of like the heavy emphasis, because we have such a reduced team, and I think there's broader understanding that work items will move the needle for technical debt, right, in the long term. So I'll see what I can do on that front, right, just to take some of that pressure off of the reduced team and still having so much kind of like so much of a magnifying glass on our capacity and what we're doing with it. So I'll take an action item on that too.
John, we missed your point.
Yeah, it's just what I know so far is that it's not officially an allocation yet, as far as I know. I just know there's a heavy focus on it, and we're kind of being asked, you know, just for a straight count as a simple thing to feed up higher up the management tree, like just to figure out how many people are working on reliability currently. I would say it like kind of makes sense in product planning, because improving our error budgets, I mean, besides epic boards and discussions like Banzai pipelines, it's extremely fragmented in small issues, so they could be spread out amongst the team. And on the certify side, it's one major thing, which is one job that's being repeatedly retried, so, and failing. So yeah, it does make sense in that context where you have like a lot of different things to work on, and they're very small, and you could spread them out amongst the team. Might not make so much sense where you have one or two large things you're focusing on.
Mm-hmm. That's good context. Yeah, that kind of answers what I was saying. If we had one or two issues we could tackle, I'd be fine with that too. We don't need to open the can of worms right now as well, but we could look at pushing off the requirements or feature work for 3 months. I know Charlie was heavily involved with requirements. So I'm not sure how that transition will happen, but that might be something we take offline.
It's going to be hard to explain, but basically like the strategy that we took with moving requirements to work item types was to have a period where we sync everything that happens on requirements to a work item in the background, right? And that means everything like state, title, description, also means all the system notes. And we know from the promotion of issues to epics, the copy and system notes can be extremely slow. So if we stop now, we're leaving all that technical debt in. And so that's where my concern comes from, that we'll go over here to fix this thing over here and just ignore the fact that we're leaving this thing on fire behind us. And so for me, like ideally what would happen would be we'd move one member of the team earlier, you know, on the schedule that's been given to us, I guess, which is next week. And then we would come up with a mitigation for this kind of technical debt, do that, and then move the second team member over, which is almost definitely Charlie, because she's been working on this project to date.
Do you think we would have that flexibility to do your plan just to shift 1 by 1 week?
I have no idea. All I can do is
Who do
ask.
we ask?
Yeah, all I can do is ask when
Could
we're
we
asked
move
for
forward
guesses.
until we're told not to? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. It's
Okay.
it's evolving. Right?
Okay.
Donald, you had a question about OKRs?
Oh yeah. So do y'all think we need to update our OKRs, specifically our shared product OKRs?
I think we just leave it, and if we don't hit it, we don't hit it, and then this is part of why. I mean, it's like there has to be some sort of signals up the chain that trade-offs have been made, right?
Works for me.
Other people can have dissenting opinions, and please, if you do, feel free. That's just one idea.
I think one of the most important outcomes of this is that as PMs and everywhere else that we do keep communicating trade-offs, shifts in our category features, that we're constantly communicating the impact of this.
I also just realized, I don't know if it was in the initial what John said, but it's, I think, important to remember that this is several teams. It's not just plan. At first it was like very hard for me to come to grips with the change here, because it's like, it's a big impact for us, but it's also several other teams are being hit the same way. So don't feel like plan is like specifically being singled out. That's a reminder I've had to kind of tell myself as I have been thinking through this.
Yeah, Kristen, Gabe, we should create an issue to capture the impact, right? And we can update it as we go, right, as this week progresses, but I think it is important to have that all consolidated somewhere, so we can continue to communicate and also look back on it if we ever wonder, you know, for historical purposes, like, hey, why did this date change, right? It's all hopefully documented in that issue.
Kristen, we said the same thing at the same time.
Jinx.
So yes, good ideas. Any other thoughts?
Do any of y'all at the like IC level, we've been doing a lot of manager and product manager chat here, which I understand is kind of, it's our domain, but do y'all have concerns or questions or anything that we can answer while we're on a sync call? It's fine if not, just wanted to like specifically probe for that. Good. No, I'm just kidding.
I think it makes sense to keep pushing forward with work items as we can. We're going to lose momentum, but shouldn't come to a complete stop, hopefully. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done in the covers, and the UI can definitely keep moving forward, and maybe even pieces of the back end, Mario and the rest of the team. So I don't think we can sprint towards it, but I think we should at least keep walking.
All right, Alexis, you're up then.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Jake. I appreciate you asking. I'll try to be quick because I might have to dip out in a couple minutes to one-on-one. But yeah, I'm just looking at this one issue around duplication basically of issue weights. And I apologize, I am using one monitor today, just my laptop, so this is difficult. But yeah, like in boards, what is the weight of an epic basically? And then how do we display that in a column on a board? Because there's two items there that are different hierarchy, they look the same hierarchy, and they can be duplicating weight. So I want to ask feedback from like people outside of plan designers. So I tried to visualize this in a friendlier way. So it probably looks really silly, but kind of thinking about it like, okay, we have this big backpack full of stuff, has like 10 things in it. It weighs about 88 ounces. And this is like the overall epic. Then maybe we have these two smaller epics, child epics within it. They also contain stuff. And then we also have this thing that is has a weight, right? And then there are things underneath it that also have weight. So maybe they're bottles of water in the bags that are in the backpack. So if you visualize this in a nest or in a tree, that makes sense because you see how it rolls up. But when you're looking at a column, you have this, there's three things here, that's obvious, but it's not obvious, let's say, that this little bag has three things nested in it to create that 32 weight. And one of those things that's nested within this bag is these three bottles that is also displayed in the column. So just thinking about this and like, what would it make sense to display as a weight here? Is there any scenarios where it would make sense to kind of just like display everything all at once? I can't envision that. I would think that we would want to basically subtract this from this to show the overall weight. But there's some scenarios where it's confusing. Like let's say I move these little bottles to the next column, my overall weight will not decrease. Like there's some things in there that can be confusing. Or let's say I have the backpack in this column, it's always going to be that overall 88 weight, even if I move everything else but the backpack out of that column. So I know that sounds weird and it's early here for me. So yes, it's probably weird, but that's what I'm thinking through. I don't know if y'all have any off the cuff feedback, but if you want to talk async, you can also do it in this issue or in here, but I'll leave it open if anyone wants to talk for a second.
I was just going to add that I don't think we should duplicate the counterweight. Don't really know what the ideal UX is though. I would almost expect to not have different epics at different levels, because we're going to deal with this when we do parenting on work items, same thing, to be on the same board at the same time, right? Like I almost want to like zoom in and out of my hierarchy, right? So if I go up to the highest level, I only see a board that has all the items of the highest level. If I zoom in a little bit, I go down a level and I see only those issues, right? Or only those work items if I go down again. So that way, like you don't have to mix and match a hierarchy on a flat structure.
That's kind of where my brain started going to, Gabe. Is it, you're almost seeing that like let's say the backpack is the epic. Are you saying those bags under the backpack should not be epics? They're kind of another thing, or maybe the backpack is not an epic, they're all like different items, or?
Yeah, that's how customers are going to end up using it, where they're going to call each of the levels. They'll call the backpack a backpack, and then they'll call the bag something else, and then they'll call whatever it is under that something else, right? One product that does this in an interesting way, I think, is RoadMonk. Worth checking out. They do sort of like the zooming idea where you go from like this high level roadmap view and you can zoom in. And as you zoom in, it actually zooms into the lower level work items as you go. That might be an interesting way to look at it. But yeah, like I wouldn't, because to me, like a backpack is a backpack and the bags that are in the backpack are not the same thing as a backpack.
But we're making them right now. So yeah, that's the confusion. That makes sense.
That's just my
Thank
2 cents. Though.
No, that's good 2 cents. Thank you. What about you, Melissa?
I have the next point. Allowing a direct relationship to a parent when it's already related further down the line is a little bit weird to me. Like it's an edge case here, and I could see it being an edge case in other scenarios. So I think that's something I don't have an answer. I just think that's the root of the issue, right? That it's like related in 2 ways.
I agree. And it's the same in a list, right? So within the epic list, you can see epics across different hierarchy and you wouldn't notice, or like there's no indication that some are child epics, which is also the same kind of problem, but we're not calculating weight. So I guess it's a little less painful. But good point. Anyone else? John, you disagreeing, I guess?
I think I'm agreeing, unless I misunderstood.
I think I said you are just agreeing.
Oh, I'm just, I thought you said I'm disagreeing.
Too early for me. Yeah, you are disagreeing. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing.
Cool. Otherwise, I'll share my screen again and then disappear. But yeah, I've been trying to track kind of what I'm working on because I get a lot of to-dos and I feel like I'm working enough hours, but I'm just not getting to some of the things that I would like to focus on. And I feel like I can't answer all the to-dos I would like to. So I want to help all of y'all and like answer all the questions you have, but like sometimes I just feel like I don't have enough time in the day. So I'm trying to figure out why. At the beginning, or just, I started tracking kind of milestone and weekly. So I had this like weekly file that I would check things off. Sometimes it would get out of date because it's just again, priorities would kind of like shift or like something would happen. So I started also tracking this at a milestone level, trying to get a little higher level as well. And then I'm going to zoom back in. And I've been trying to kind of put things on like an Eisenhower matrix and think about like, what are the things I'm working on that are impactful, what's urgent, but not impactful or priority, things like that, and labeling them that way and putting them into each day. So thinking about what I wanted to work on in this day, what I ended up working on, where I focused my time. So I just started that last week and I'm still working on it. But when I look at the time spent for me, it's like mostly in this like urgent, but not priority. So a lot of like reviewing MRs or like thinking about like quick designs that I didn't expect to account for, but it like came up and someone needs help with something and I need to mock something up or like things like that, which is obviously not ideal. It's like not urgent and urgent, but not priority, or not urgent, but not priority. So probably that's not where I want to be focusing my time. So I just want to flag it up to y'all. And if you have like ideas or like maybe we can think about how to kind of change up the workflow if that needs to be, but I'm ideating on it on my end, just FYI, but curious about y'all's thoughts.
That's incredible. Like, so Google Docs is going really slow for me, so I'll just vocalize them. Yeah, so how many of these items are directly related to a to-do that you have in GitLab, like a GitLab to-do, as in not something you're tracking yourself? Like, do they all map one-to-one or many-to-one to a to-do that you have there?
So each of those items, it's more like I'll be like review MRs that I didn't realize were priority, or mock something up for this to do. So it's not one-to-one, but I tried to kind of like put them into little themes, and then like anything that could be labeled as a certain part of kind of that matrix, and thinking about also like tactical versus strategic work. But honestly, if I accounted for all my to-dos, there would probably be more work. It's like if I looked at all my to-dos, I'd probably like get even less done that's priority. So that's where I'm kind of struggling, because I want to make sure I'm addressing everything. I don't know if that answered your question.
So GitLab to-dos aren't your single source of truth for what you work from. You work from something else.
I try to mostly work through to-dos. It's just there's a lot of them, I guess, for me, and I want to make sure I'm answering them in a more timely manner, if that makes sense. But yes, to-dos, I would say, is my main source of contact.
Right, and currently there's no difference between a to-do where you're tagged in an MR and asked for a review versus like CC'd in a comment. They have equal priority. We don't have any different priority in our to-do system. So it's up to you to like figure out which one's more important, or if you just want to work sequentially through your to-dos or whatever.
That's part of it. And mostly also like if I get tagged, or if I'm a reviewer in an MR, that's like the #1 priority for designers. And it's so unpredictable. So like I can't kind of account for that in my capacity, that like, okay, I might have to spend this many hours on MRs. And there's also the community contributors. Some MRs are more like pairing versus reviewing. So it's just kind of like that I can't really predict, right? How much of my time is going to go there. And because it's such a high priority, it just kind of gets a little volatile sometimes. But I'd say it's like the reviews is #1, right? That I focus on that above all else. And then other to-dos that seem like people might be blocked, that's where I focus next. And also my priorities, if that makes sense. And then OKRs, which I had a pretty heavy OKR quarter last quarter. So that was also a little part of it.
Sorry, I know I've probably contributed a little bit to that.
Oh no, please! I don't want to.
No. I'm just saying. Sometimes a tweak of something in the UI or something will come across that makes complete sense, and we just kind of want to get feedback. But I know you're super busy with other things, so I'm not sure what let me know what the best way to do that is. And,
yeah, and like, so honestly, what I'm trying to figure out is how I can interact more with y'all, because I feel badly when I can't like respond as quickly as I want to, because I'm like focusing like on a bunch of stuff. So like that's what I'm trying to figure out. I appreciate the asks and like the collaboration. So like that's what I want, right? So don't feel bad for it. But yes, I'll try to figure out like a better process. So like that's more seamless, I guess. That makes sense. But yeah, no, I appreciate you asking for feedback and collaboration.
I'll just go. What is your definition of priority? Are you using direction labels, which we haven't been using too much because we've been focused mostly on work items? And how are these MRs skipping the design process? So like there's a lot of issues that get opened. And ideally in our workflow, the design should kick back to workflow design, the designer's looped in, but like it sounds like the majority of ours are in the MR, in the final hours, design is brought in.
That's part of it. Yeah, and like I said, I think it's just that unpredictable. Like I can't predict how much design will be needed. Some designs, like they might be not completely finished and it might need a little bit more pairing. Maybe because I didn't realize it would be a priority. Like it's something we're working on that I didn't realize was still in focus, things like that. But how I determine priorities, mostly it should be from our workflow, right? So like I said, MR reviews. There's some stuff in here that's kind of interesting to me. So like, yeah, like feedback requests from other designers. So we have that as well. Like I spend a lot of time helping other designers. And then, what we label as deliverable, and then things assigned to me. And then OKRs, although I feel like OKRs often end up higher because like, it feels like they feel like they're higher because I get pinged in them more often. So this is our workflow. This is how I determine priority, if that's helpful.
It's interesting they don't have direction label on there.
They do,
Which is-
or no, deliverable,
oh,
yeah.
That's
well,
but direction is the one that supports the highest product
Mhm.
priority. So
yeah, I
interesting.
think this could be tinkered. But
Okay.
yeah, I think it's the MRs is that is one of the larger things I'm trying to figure out. And some designers don't get asked to review MRs, and Marcel and Pedro are working on this. They have a little more capacity to think about it. Like, why is that? Like, why are some designers reviewing a lot? Why are some not reviewing at all? Like, can we share that a little bit more? But I think that is one of the largest things that kind of like throws me for a loop capacity wise. But yeah, these are the priorities.
I was curious how many of those like tasks are part of our stage or other stages, and then also versus the just UX department as a whole. Like, because I think we can definitely iterate on our process at the stage level, but I'm interested in how much that would actually impact if it's stuff outside of plan, if that makes sense.
Or even
Yeah, I
the
think
group level. Yeah.
Ooh, what do you mean by that, Kristen?
Oh, just like product planning versus project management. That would be a cool split to see too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get, I can start labeling that too. I think that would be interesting. It seems like, especially probably the last 2 weeks, I had more OKR, like UX admin type stuff going on. And then also very tactical. So like tactical work, meaning reviewing, not like a lot of research or like high level vision, just like very kind of tactical, answering questions, things like that. And that would be more probably just plan as a whole, Gabe. But I would say at least like last week, it was a lot of UX admin, OKR, that kind of stuff. Then like tactical MRs within probably product planning, and then just like questions as a whole within plan. But I think that's a good thing to track. I'll remember that. What else? I don't want to hog the whole meeting, but anyone else? Looks like Donald.
Yeah, so I mean, as you said, like MRs probably take up the biggest unplanned time from you. So I was wondering, because especially with maintainers on the engineering side, a lot of the reviews they have are also unplanned. And while we don't explicitly say it's the #1 priority, maintainers have an SLO of like 2 days to get a response back. So I don't know if that's the same with design. Like, is there an expectation to get a review back within 2 days?
36 hours, right? I think
36
so.
hours?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I was just wanting to see if Natalia or any of the other maintainers have any tips for how they get through their reviews. Natalia?
Yeah, for maintainers, it's a bit easier because we're allowed to set up the red dot, which is basically not available for reviews, and it's not really possible for UX. But you still can communicate. 36 hours are not like written in stone, right? You can still say, okay, it takes more time, and try to time box it, because it's really hard when you have many merge request reviews to take at least like hour, maybe 2 for reviews. And then if you're not doing it, if you say like you need more time, I believe like any of front-end engineers will be very receptive if you say, I need more time, I need it 1 day more. It's better to have a better UX review than just like you looking at them more like, okay, fine, I approve this. No, don't do this, please. And also one more thing about urgent tasks. Sometimes that's what I learned. Sometimes we take things as urgent when they are communicated to you promptly, synchronously. So someone pings you on the Slack, like, Alexis, please, can you look at this? And in fact, this is low priority, but we consider it as urgent because you were pinged. And in these cases, I tend to do the same. I tend to do this to the to-do list. So at the end of my to-do list, I say, okay, I will come back to you with an answer because this is not the highest priority. This is just synchronous communication. And I know it's hard, but it helped me a lot because I'm pinged multiple times through the day. And if I respond to everyone immediately, I will be doing no work. That's my
Yeah,
two
that's
cents.
saying no, or like not no, but later, right? Like that's so tough. But yeah, that's a good point. And I think time boxing is a good idea too. Trying to think. I feel like to me, it's like I feel like I need to unblock and I don't know, it's tough. I'll keep thinking through it. And because it's such a high priority for us, and it's because also it's hard for me to kind of be like, hey, I don't have capacity for this. Like so and so can review this for you, because like we're kind of maybe more siloed in UX, or I don't know what it is, but we are thinking through that kind of thing. Like how can we have like backup reviewers? Like could that be a thing to kind of share the load a little bit more? But that's a good point. Thank you.
Are the majority of the MRs or the requests you're getting from within plan? Because I mean, it's also hard. There's 7 or 8 front end engineers, and you and Holly are the only UX reviewers for all of them. We kind of have that requirement that every visual change needs to be approved by UX. How would you feel about maybe having like us relaxing that requirement a little bit more, especially for the smaller things, and especially for the things that were not requested from you or Holly? I don't know how we feel about that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like I'd almost rather be pinged and this be like, nah, this is kind of fine. Like, all right, but it still does context switch, and then I'm still spending the time to review it and then making that decision. So yeah, that could be an interesting point to like think about what is the threshold, but I feel like it could maybe be kind of a slippery slope. So I'd probably err on the side of like want to at least look at it to say it doesn't need a lot of review, but that's a good point. And I think that is one of the things we should probably think through. And then if it's something that's very, very small and like very obvious, very visual, like can another designer review it even, right? Like if it's something that like really anyone could look at and be like, oh, like the padding is, whatever, like nothing too complex. Like if it's small enough, like aiming for MRs that like any designer could review could be something to explore. And also to your other point, I'd say this milestone, I had a lot of like plan stage specific or like team specific MRs, but often I also get community contributor, I can't say that word today, MRs, and those often I had to spend a little bit more time on them just because one, I want to encourage just people to contribute. And then two, sometimes they're just kind of like big ideas and then, not priorities sometimes because they're kind of like out of left field, but I want to encourage those people and make sure that we're merging things that make sense. So Kristen, I'm looking at you and I thought I was frozen because your face wasn't moving. Anyway, I don't know why you're on my screen, but hello. But yeah, that is that. Thanks, Donald. Did you have any follow-up?
No, let's move to John's point.
Sorry, I was going on a tangent looking at Kristen's face, but I thought she was frozen. So again, Monday morning, or I'm like, what day is it? Wednesday morning. Okay, someone else talk, please.
I can help you out. Yeah, so I watched the videos that you made about like where you demonstrated reviewing with Gitpod and with GDK, and it seemed like you spent a lot of time in kind of spinning up those environments. And I'm wondering like how much of the time you spend reviewing is actually like debugging and setting up these environments so you can review. Do you do that every time you review something, or is there something we could do? Like two suggestions. So one is like for example, Eugenia's working on caching issue counts in the groups page. We could just take screenshots of what will happen there. It'll be rounded to 1K, or anything over 1,000 will be rounded to 1K. I mean, we can take screenshots of that and drop it in the description if that saved you time. Second, like possibility, like wacky idea, like we could make the responsibility of the engineer to spin up the Gitpod environment with their changes. That would give you the chance to just basically go check out the changes with instructions from the engineer. And it helps us as well because it it keeps our work unblocked. So I don't know if any of those would be helpful.
Could be interesting to have like an instance that you share in Gitpod. I'd say like it's definitely a huge blocker for a lot of designers, especially when we just had local GDK. A lot of people were having problems with it. I don't have as much of a problem with it. I've been using Gitpod a lot, like also because other designers prefer it. So like kind of almost like you said, debugging it in another manner, like just to kind of build that empathy. I don't have as much of an issue with spinning things up. Gitpod takes longer because every time it's like a new instance, it doesn't remember feature flags, things like that, licenses. So that does take a little bit longer than local GDK. I'd say they're not as big of blockers for me, but definitely for other designers, yes. They are somewhat of a blocker. And I don't usually like to rely on like screenshots. I think they're really helpful. And like, especially like a GIF or something. I don't personally usually like to rely on them unless it's a very small change. So again, maybe it's like really small and any designer could review it, that kind of thing. But usually I still review it. But that's again, something to think about. Maybe that's just a me thing. Like maybe I don't need to get so in depth. So. But sometimes I find weird things. Like I always find something weird when I actually review it. So it seems helpful.
Yeah, fair enough. I didn't want to undermine or anything. It's just like for very small changes, but that are nonetheless like a change to the interface. You know what I mean? Like very small, very risk-free and predictable changes. But yeah, I can see your point, like that you may see things that we miss. I think I remember that when we initially talked about rounding off these counts, you mentioned like some people use those counts to know where they are in the application. Like if I see a count rounded here, I know I'm in a project and not in a group. So if we round them for groups as well, like it might be like a psychological thing. So I wouldn't even have thought of that. So,
but it's a good point, and it's something, and like maybe kind of like the theme I'm thinking here is like getting MRs that anyone could review across any stage, like any designer, or like thinking about what are those MRs and maybe being able to better share them. And I really appreciate when y'all do include the screenshots and the GIFs or GIFs, whatever you want to say, like things like that. Those are really helpful, especially just even for wayfinding. So I really appreciate that. I don't usually rely on them, but some other designers do. So again, I'm not every designer, but yeah, those are good points. So I think this could be really helpful, especially for designers that don't review as often, John, for sure.
Do we need to enable the reviewer roulette to include designers? I don't think they are, but I mean, we currently have the ability that they suggest other people, and then if we feel that there's a better match for somebody else, then we choose them. So would that help at all?
That's a really good idea. I think we are thinking about that. Like, how would that work? Especially because some designers don't review often, and maybe like, I don't know, this might not be right to say, but maybe don't know how to review. So we're trying to figure out, that's kind of our baseline right now. Like, not that they're doing something poorly, it's just like making sure all designers understand how to review first. And then I think that would be ideal. I think that's a really good idea. I think that's what we would strive for, is having some kind of roulette. It's a good idea. And I'll update y'all on the progress as we work towards, it's part of our OKR, thinking about like the state of MRs and better design reviews. So it's a good idea for that.
And I just had one other question. In terms of setting up the environment and stuff, are review apps not working well for that? In terms of, I would think that would actually be the best use of review apps sometimes, is in UI changes. Does that not work very well, or?
I barely use them. I don't even know why. I think the seeding of the data maybe is part of it. But I mean, I guess that's kind of the case for many things. But I don't know. Just for some reason, I mostly prefer like local GDK. It just seems easier for me to use. And again, maybe it's just like a personal preference. I
saw
would say
that
those
with
are
there's a lot.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, There's a lot of designers that can't use it because of the data seeding issue. It almost needs to have almost like a test case set up or data seeded for that to be really seamless. Same with setting state. Mhm.
We should do that.
It would make it awesome.
I'll link some, my computer's been like so slow, I think, because the Google Doc, but we are thinking through some of those. So I'll put those in the agenda if y'all want to think about that. But better design reviews. I think Pedro is kind of trying to lead that initiative, probably Marcel as well, and create, which makes sense. So, but that's a good question as well. But thanks, y'all. And like no action items necessarily. I'm just thinking through this and thinking about priorities and all. And I could flag some things from a design perspective, even on like our design workflow. So anything else? I've been talking a lot.
We're almost at time, but I can quickly verbalize Marchand's point for him since he had to drop, which is that there's some updates to the docs and style guide on how we write the terms issue boards and epic boards. So they're lowercase now, which mostly applies to documentation, but I know I have at times struggled on whether to not to capitalize these things. So it's nice to have some guidance. So check those out and make sure to adhere to them and provide feedback.
All right, we're at time then. Thanks very much, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a
Thank
great
you.
Wednesday.
Have a good one, y'all. Bye.